Okay, the next topic under political law is the executive department. So, number 4. Number 4 natin yan. So, Article 7, Section 1 of the 1987 Constitution vests executive power on the President of the Philippines. The President is the head of state and head of the government and functions as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. As Chief Executive, the President exercises control over all the executive departments, bureaus, and offices. So, letter A under Executive Department. Letter A, yung qualifications, election, and term of President and Vice President. The President of the Philippines is elected by direct vote by the people for a term of 6 years. He may serve only one term and is ineligible for re-election. The term of the President of the Philippines starts at noon of the 30th day of June after the election. So under the Philippine Constitution, an individual may become president provided he meets the following criteria. Number 1, natural-born Filipino. Number 2, a registered voter. Number 3, must be able to read and write. Number 4, at least 40 years of age at the day of the election. Number 5, must have resided in the Philippines 10 years before the election is held. So, punta tayo sa powers of the President. So, meron siyang ilan ba yung powers ng President ito? Number 1, general, executive, and administrative powers. Yan. So, number 1, under the general, executive, and administrative powers of the President, yung power of control over the executive branch. So, ang ibig sabihin nun is restructuring, reconfiguring, and appointments. Yan. So, the Administrative Code also provides for the President to be responsible for the strict implementation of laws, offices under the Executive. So, under the Constitution, the President has the power of control over the Executive branch. Under the Administrative Code, the President is also responsible for the strict implementation of laws, offices under the Executive. So, meron din siyang ordinance power. So, ito yung power to give executive issuances to streamline the policy and programs of the administration. So, ito yung kapangyarihan niya na mag-issue ng mga polisiya. Isa na doon yung executive orders. Yan. These are acts of the President providing for rules of a general or permanent character in implementation or execution of constitutional or statutory powers. Executive orders. Administrative orders. Yan. Under pa rin yan ng ordinance power. Acts of the President which relate to particular aspects of governmental operations in pursuance of his duties as the administrative head shall be promulgated in the administrative orders. Yeah. Proclamations, acts of the President fixing a date or declaring a status or condition of public moment or interest upon the existence of which the operation of a specific law or regulation is made to depend shall be promulgated in proclamations which shall have the force of an executive order. Meron din siyang memorandum orders, acts of the President on matters of administrative detail or of subordinate or temporary interest which only concern a particular officer or government office shall be embodied in memorandum orders. Meron din siyang memorandum circulars, acts of the President on matters relating to internal administration which the President desires to bring to attention of all or some of the departments, agencies, bureaus, or offices of the government for information or compliance shall be embodied in memorandum circulars. Meron din siyang general or special orders, acts and commands of the President in his capacity as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines shall be issued as general or special orders. So, yun yung mga ordinance power niya, executive order, administrative order, proclamations, memorandum orders, memorandum circulars, at general or special orders. So, ikatatlo sa ating, dami kasi mga sub-sub nito, no? Under general, executive, and administrative powers, nabanggitan natin yung power of control over the executive branch, the ordinance power, ikatatlo, yung power over aliens. Yeah, they have the power to change status of foreigners, yeah. Deportation. They have the power to overrule decisions of the Board of Commissions of the Bureau of Immigration. Number 4, powers of eminent domain, escheat, land reservation, and recovery of ill-gotten wealth. And number 5, power of general supervision over local governments. So yan yung kanyang general, executive, and administrative powers. Ikalawa sa kapangyarihan niya na major, yung power of appointment. So in general, the President may appoint officials of the Philippine government subject to the approval of the Commission on Appointments. Confirmation and bypass appointments, si midnight and ad interim appointments. Ano ba yung midnight appointment na yan? Mamaya na natin i-define. Tungo muna tayo sa two kinds of presidential appointment. So may dalawang uri yun. Number one, made during the session of Congress. Ito yung regular appointments or nominations. And number two, appointments made during the recess of Congress, which are also known as ad interim appointments. So yun pala siya. So regular appointment, yan, President sends a nomination to the Commission on Appointments. Tapos, yung Commission on Appointments gives its consent, and then the President issues appointment, and then the acceptance by the nominee, tapos mag-oath taking na siya. So yun yung regular appointment. Yun yung made during the session of Congress. Punta naman tayo sa pangalawang uri ng appointment, yung ad interim appointment. So under the Constitution, the President is empowered to issue appointments while the Congress is not in session. It is permanent in nature and takes effect immediately. The person appointed may immediately discharge his functions. Ito nga lang, it ceases to be valid upon disapproval of the Commission on Appointments. So yun yung dalawang uri ng presidential appointments. Made during the session of Congress, yung regular appointment, at appointments made during the recess of Congress, yung ad interim appointment. Itong midnight appointment naman is defined as an appointment to political office made during the last hours of the term of office of the person in whom the right of making such appointment is vested. Under the jurisprudence, it is prohibited. Ipinagbabawal because an outgoing president has the duty to prepare for orderly transfer of authority to the incoming president. He should not obstruct the policies of his successor. So ilan na yung nabanggit natin, all in all? Ilan na yung nabanggit nating powers yan? General, executive, and administrative powers, power of appointment. Punta naman tayo sa power of control and supervision. So under that, ito, merong doctrine of qualified political agency. Doctrine of qualified political agency. Under this doctrine, department secretaries are alter egos or assistants of the president, and their acts are presumed to be those of the latter unless disapproved by him. Thus, as a rule, an aggrieved party affected by the decision of a cabinet secretary need not appeal to the office of the president and may file a petition for certiorari directly in the Court of Appeals, assailing the act of said secretary. Yon. So kung ikaw ay may problema sa decision ng isang department head, ikaw ay ang tanging daan mo ay papunta sa Court of Appeals via certiorari. Okay. Number 2, executive departments and offices. The president shall have control over all executive departments and offices. And sa local government units naman, under the Constitution, the president is mandated to supervise local governments all over the country. Meron din siyang emergency powers. Yan. So under Article 6, Section 23 of the Philippine Constitution, sinasabi niya, in times of war or other national emergency, the Congress may, by law, authorize the President for a limited period and subject to such restrictions as it may prescribe to exercise powers necessary and proper to carry out a declared national policy. Unless sooner withdrawn by resolution of the Congress, such powers shall cease upon the next adjournment thereof. So, sabi pa rito, the Congress by vote of 2/3 of both houses voting separately kapag ka state of war ang pinag-uusapan. So, makakamtan ng Pangulo ang emergency powers by a vote of 2/3 of both houses voting separately. Yan, pag state of war. Isang example pa, yung COVID-19 Bayanihan Act. Yan, mga ni-request ni PRRD sa Congress na mabigyan siya ng emergency powers. Punta naman tayo sa letter F, military powers. So under military powers, meron siyang calling out powers at declaration of martial law and suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. Calling out powers under the Constitution, the President as the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Philippines may call out the Armed Forces of the Philippines through a special order to suppress lawless violence, invasion, or rebellion. Ayan. Declaration of martial law. Ang ingay ng jeep, no? Ito. declaration of martial law and suspension of the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus. In case of invasion or rebellion, when the public safety requires it, the President may, for a period not exceeding 60 days, suspend the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus or place of the Philippines or any part thereof under martial law. The President shall submit a report in person or writing in Congress within 48 hours from the proclamation of martial law. The Congress, voting jointly by a vote of at least a majority of all its members in regular or special session, may revoke such proclamation. Pero pwede rin siyang extend. Yan. Kasi sabi, di ba, not exceeding 60 days, di ba? For a period not exceeding 60 days. Pero pwede rin siyang extend upon the initiative of the President. The Congress may, in the same manner, extend such proclamation or suspension for a period to be determined by Congress if the invasion or rebellion shall persist and public safety requires it. So meron din ang Pangulong executive clemency. Letter G. Pursuant to the Philippine Constitution, executive clemency refers to reprieve, absolute pardon, conditional pardon, with or without parole conditions, and commutation of sentence as may be granted by the President of the Philippines. So ano-ano ba yung mga forms of executive clemency? Nabanggit na natin. Yung reprieve, number 1, postpones the execution of an offense to a future day certain. Number 2, commutation is a remission of a part or cutting short of the punishment, a substitution of a lesser penalty for the one originally imposed. Yan, ayon yan sa jurisprudence. Remission of fines and forfeiture entails non-collection of money on property lawfully adjudged, but it does not have the effect of returning property already in the legal possession of the government or a third person. Ika-4 naman, yung pardon. A pardon is an act of grace. It is an act of grace proceeding from the power entrusted with the execution of the laws, which exempts the individual from the punishment for a crime committed. It is a private act through official act of the executive. Private act kasi siya ay act of grace. Pero through, though kahit na private act siya, official act siya of the executive. At ikalima ay ang amnesty. Amnesty denotes general pardon granted to a particular class or group of offenders. Okay, so ito madalas nalilito tayo. Ano ba ang kaibahan ng pardon sa amnesty? Gaya nga ng sinabi natin, the pardon is a private act which must be pleaded by the offender. Parang nagmamakaawa ka sa Pangulo, nabigyan ka ng pardon. Amnesty naman ay extended by proclamation of the Chief Executive with concurrence of Congress. With concurrence of Congress, and it is a public act. A pardon is granted to one person after conviction. Amnesty may be granted before or after the institution of criminal proceedings and sometimes even after conviction. So ang pardon looks forward, relieves the offender from the consequences of an offense but does not automatically lead to the restoration of all the rights unless expressly restored by the terms of the pardon. Parang kay Senator Robin Padilla, talagang ni-restore nung pardon na binigay sa kanya ni Pangulong Duterte lahat ng kanyang rights. A pardon also does not exempt the convicted from the payment of civil indemnity imposed upon him in a sentence. So kahit pinardon ka, pwede ka pa rin magbayad ng civil indemnity. Sa amnesty naman, amnesty looks backward and abolishes and puts into oblivion the offense so that the person is a new person, quote-unquote, new person, and stands before the law precisely as though he had committed no offense. So yan ang kaibahan ng pardon versus amnesty. Letter H, diplomatic power. Daming powers ng President. Ako, ang power ko lang, kilik-kilik pa. Never mind. Letter H, diplomatic power. Under the Philippine Constitution, the President is the head of state and has the power to form and maintain relationships with foreign countries. Letter I, powers relative to appropriation measures. So under Section 22, Article 7 of the Philippine Constitution, the President shall submit to the Congress within 30 days from the opening of every regular session as the basis of the General Appropriations Bill, a budget of expenditures and sources of financing, including receipts from existing and proposed revenue measures. So, okay na yon. Okay na tayo doon. Letter J, rules of succession. Nabanggit ko na yan, pero banggitin natin ulit. Nabanggit ko na doon sa doon sa unang part ng video. Hanapin natin yung rules on succession. So, line of succession under the Constitution in case the President of the Philippines is not able to discharge the duties of his office due to death, disability, or resignation. Ang mangyayari ay CVP. Yan. Susunod, yan. In case of the death of the President and Vice President, kunwari, si Senate President. In case of the death, disability, etc. of the President, VP, and the Senate President, si Speaker of the House of Representatives. Ayan. Pero kung Tegi Bells, kung Chugi, si President and Vice President, ang mangyayari ganito. The Congress of the Philippines is mandated to enact a law calling for a special election 3 days after the vacancy in the office of the President and Vice President. Ito yung dalawa pareho silang Tegi. The special election should occur 40 days after the enactment of the law but not later than 6 days after the enactment of the law. Sabay na vacancy. So, mangyayari siguro, temporary lang na uupo si Senate President. Hindi siya talaga, kasi magkakaroon ng special election eh. Unless, hindi ko lang sure kung pwede siyang tumakbo ng special election. Line of succession naman under the Constitution ng Vice President. So, buhay pa si President, andyan siya, si VP naman ang wala. So, the President of the Philippines is required to nominate a replacement with the concurrence of the Committee on Appointments. So, mag-nominate siya ng replacement na kailangang sang-ayunan ng Committee on Appointments. Yan. Yan yung mga powers ni President. So, isa-isahin natin ulit yung powers niya. Powers of the President. General, executive, and administrative powers. Power of appointment. Meron din siyang power of removal, power of control and supervision, emergency powers, military powers, executive clemency, diplomatic power, powers relative to appropriation measures, rules, hindi niya pala power yun, rule na pala yun ng succession. And syempre, hindi mawawala ang kilikili power ni President pag hindi siya naligo dahil busy siya. Okay, magtungo naman tayo. Number 5. Isa sa tatlong branches of the government. Na-discuss natin sa previous video yung legislative. Ngayon yung executive. Ngayon naman yung judicial department. So this is under Article 8 of the Philippine Constitution. So what is judicial power? Yan. What is judicial power? You know? So judicial power includes the duty of the courts of justice to settle actual controversies involving rights which are legally demandable and enforceable, and to determine whether or not there has been a grave abuse of discretion amounting to lack or excess of jurisdiction on the part of any branch or instrumentality of the government. Ang kapangyarihan na to, sabi rito sa Section 1 ng Article 8 of the Philippine Constitution, shall be vested. Judicial power shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such lower courts as may be established by law. Ano naman yung judicial review? Narinig na natin to kanina. It is the power of the courts to test the validity of the executive and legislative acts in light of their conformity with the Constitution. Kaya pag gumawa ng batas o may ginawang hakbang yung executive, kini-question siya kung ito ba ay constitutional. So, dahil ang may karapatan mag-interpret ay at tignan kung alinsunod ba sa konstitusyon ang mga pinagagagawa ay ang Judicial Department. Requisites of judicial review. Number 1, there must be an actual case or controversy. Number 2, the question of constitutionality must be raised by the proper party o yung proper party na may standing. Number 3, the constitutional question must be raised at the earliest possible opportunity. And number 4, the decision of the constitutional question must be necessary to the determination of the case itself. Yun yung lis mota. Pag sinabi lis mota, the decision of the constitutional question must be necessary to the determination of the case. So yun yung 4 na requisito para sa judicial review. Ano naman yung political question doctrine? Under the political question doctrine arising from the principle of separation of powers, the judicial branch cannot decide questions. The judicial branch cannot decide questions in regard to which full discretionary authority has been delegated to the legislative or executive branch of the government. Moot questions, ano naman yon? Is one that ceases to present a justiciable controversy by virtue of supervening events so that a declaration thereon would be of no practical use or value. Kumbaga, walay na. Kahit pagdesisyonan na pa, wala na. Nonsense na. Useless. Yun. Ano naman ang operative fact doctrine? Recognizes the existence and validity of a legal provision prior to it being declared as unconstitutional and hence legitimizes otherwise invalid acts done pursuant thereto because of considerations of practicality and fairness. So, merong isang legal provision nung nadeklara siyang unconstitutional, under this doctrine, it legitimizes acts na ginawa nung time na hindi pa naman na-declare na unconstitutional yung isang provision na yun. Ulitin natin, operative fact doctrine recognizes the existence and validity of a legal provision prior to it being declared as unconstitutional and hence legitimizes otherwise invalid acts done pursuant thereto because of considerations of practicality and fairness. Letter C, judicial independence and fiscal autonomy. Ayon sa Constitution to Fiscal autonomy. Under Section 3, Article 8, the judiciary shall enjoy fiscal autonomy. Appropriations for the judiciary may not be reduced by the legislative below the amount appropriated for the previous year and after approval shall be automatically and regularly released. Ano naman ang judicial independence? The independence of the judiciary shall be guaranteed by the state and enshrined in the Constitution or the law of the country. It is the duty of all governmental and other institutions to respect and observe the independence of the judiciary. Letter D, appointments to the judiciary. Ito. Qualifications. Yan. Under the 2020 revised rules of the Judicial and Bar Council, ito, qualifications applicable to members of the judiciary, the ombudsman, deputy ombudsman, and special prosecutor and chairperson, and regular members of the Legal Education Board. So ito yung nakalagay doon. Letter A, members of the judiciary, the ombudsman, deputy ombudsman, and special prosecutor and chairperson, and regular members of the Legal Education Board, except the Legal Education Board regular member representing the law student sector, and the judges of the Sharia courts, of the Sharia district courts and Sharia circuit courts in the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, must be natural-born citizens of the Philippines. And letter B, members of the Philippine Judiciary must be members of the Philippine Bar of proven competence, integrity, probity, and independence. So yun yung dalawang basic, no? Kailangan natural-born citizens and kailangan they are members of the Philippine Bar of proven competence, integrity, probity, and independence. And ito naman yung additional requirements. So kung ikaw ay magiging justice ng Supreme Court, Court of Tax Appeals, and Court of Appeals, kailangan ikaw ay at 40 years of age, tapos 15 years or more. Yan. Dali medyo hindi ko mabasa. 15 years or more. An experience of 15 years or more as judge of the lower court or engaged in the practice of law. Kung ikaw naman ay justice ng Sandigan Bayan, kailangan ganun din, 40 years of age. At ikaw naman ay merong 10 years, at least 10 years as experience na maging isang judge of the lower court or at least 10 years engaged in the practice of law. Kapag naman ikaw ay RTC or Regional Trial Court Judge, at least 35 years of age and at least 10 years experience as a judge of the lower court or engaged in the practice of law. Kapag ikaw naman ay MTC Judge, MTC, ano tawag dito? MTC, MCTC, mga ganyan, yung first level courts, at least 30 years of age and at least 5 years engaged in the practice of law or have held a public office in the Philippines. Sa mga kapatid naman nating Muslim, Assalamualaikum. Para sa mga Sharia High Court, must be Muslims, regular members of the Philippine Bar, at least 40 years of age, at least 15 years or more engaged in the practice of law, and completed at least 2 years of Sharia or Islamic jurisprudences. Kapag ikaw naman ay magiging Sharia District Court Judges, ayun, ikaw ay dapat at least 35 years of age and at least 10 years experience as a lower court judge or at least 10 years engaged in the practice of law. Yan. So, yung Sharia District Court Judges, same ang qualifications niya doon sa na kailangan mo rin, must be learned in Islamic jurisprudence. Yan. Yan yung mga additional requirements. Okay, so ano naman ang Judicial and Bar Council? Nakalagay ito sa Section 8, Article 8 of the Constitution. So a Judicial and Bar Council is hereby created under the supervision of the Supreme Court, composed of the Chief Justice as ex officio chairman. Ex officio, parang rightful. Dahil siya ang Chief Justice, siya ang ex officio chairman. The Secretary of Justice and the Representative of Congress as ex officio members. Tapos, representative of the IBP, a professor of law, a retired member of the Supreme Court, and a representative of the private sector. Etong representative of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, professor of law, retired member of the Supreme Court, and the representative of the private sector shall be appointed by the President. So the representative of the IBP shall serve for 4 years. Ayan. The professor of law shall serve for 3 years. The retired member of the Supreme Court shall serve for 2 years, and the representative of the private sector shall serve for 1 year. At meron pa silang isang kasama. So, isa-isa natin ulit, Chief Justice, Secretary of Justice, Representative of Congress, tapos yung appointed by the President, yung representative of the IBP, Professor of Law, retired member of the Supreme Court, representative of the private sector, at yung Supreme Court Clerk of Court as ex officio secretary and shall keep a record of its proceedings. The Council shall have the principal function of recommending appointees to the judiciary. It may exercise such other functions and duties as the Supreme Court may assign to it. So, punta naman tayo sa the Supreme Court under Section 4, Article 8 of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, parang mali yung sinabi ko. The Supreme Court under Section 4, Article 8 of the Constitution. Yan. The Supreme Court shall be composed of a Chief Justice and 14 Associate Justices. It may sit en banc or in its discretion in division of 3, 5, or 7 members. Any vacancy shall be filled within 90 days from the occurrence thereof. So the Supreme Court, under the Constitution, shall have the following powers. Number 1, exercise original jurisdiction over cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers and consuls, and over petitions for certiorari, prohibition, mandamus, quo warranto, and habeas corpus. So meron silang original jurisdiction. Yung sa mga nabanggit ko na yun. Number 2, they shall have the power to review, revise, reverse, modify, or affirm on appeal or certiorari, as the law or the rules of court may provide, final judgments and orders of lower courts in letter A, all cases in which the constitutionality or validity of any treaty, international or executive agreement, law, presidential decree, proclamation, order, instruction, ordinance, or regulation is in question. Letter B. Letter B, all cases involving the constitutionality of any tax, impost, assessment, or toll, or any penalty imposed in relation thereto. Letter C, all cases in which the jurisdiction of any lower court is in issue. Letter D, all criminal cases in which the penalty imposed is reclusion perpetua or higher. And letter E, all cases in which only an error or question of law is involved. Ikatatlong kapangyarihan nila, assign temporarily judges of lower courts to other stations as public interest may require. That assignment shall not exceed 6 months without consent of the judge concerned. Number 4, order a change of venue or place of trial to avoid a miscarriage of justice. Number 5, promulgate rules concerning the protection and enforcement of constitutional rights, pleading, practice, and procedure in all courts, the admission to the practice of law, the integrated bar, and legal assistance to the underprivileged. And number 6, appoint all officials and employees of the judiciary in accordance with the civil service law. So under Section 6 ng Article 8 of the Philippine Constitution, the Supreme Court shall have administrative supervision over all the courts and the personnel thereof. And ating Supreme Court of the Philippines. Ika-6 na topic. Kaya pa ba? Ito naman yung constitutional commissions. Yan. Constitutional commissions. Under Article 9 of the Philippine Constitution. Letter A, common provisions. Section 1, the constitutional commissions which shall be independent are the Civil Service Commission, Commission on Elections, and the Commission on Audit. Tatlo yan. Section 2, ng Article 9, no member of a constitutional commission shall, during his tenure, hold any other office or employment. Neither shall he engage in the practice of any profession or in the active management or control of any business which in any way may be affected by the functions of his office, nor shall he be financially interested directly or indirectly in any contract with or in any franchise or privilege granted by the government, any of its instrumentalities or agencies, including government-owned or controlled corporations, or their subsidiaries. Section 3. The salary of the chairman and the commissioners shall be fixed by law and shall not be decreased during their tenure. Section 4. The constitutional commissions shall appoint their officials and employees in accordance with the law. Section 5. The commission shall enjoy fiscal autonomy. Their approved annual appropriations shall be automatically and regularly released. Oy, parang yung sa Supreme Court din. Section 6. Each commission and bank may promulgate its own rules concerning pleadings and practice before it or before any of its offices. Such rules, however, shall not diminish, increase, or modify substantive rights. Section 7. Each commission shall decide by a majority vote of all its members any case or matter brought before it within 60 days from the date of its submission for decision or resolution. A case or matter is deemed submitted for decision or resolution upon the filing of the last pleading, brief, or memorandum required by the rules of the Commission or by the Commission itself. Unless otherwise provided by this Constitution or by law, any decision, order, or ruling of each Commission may be brought to the Supreme Court on certiorari. Yun lang ang daan mo patungong Supreme Court pagka i-contest mo yung isang desisyon ng isang Constitutional Commission, pupunta ka sa Supreme Court on certiorari by the aggrieved party within 30 days from receipt of a copy thereof. Letter B, powers and functions and jurisdiction. Letter C, composition and qualifications of members. Letter D, prohibited offices and interests. Sige nga, sabay-sabay na natin yung mga BCD na yun. Magtungo muna tayo sa the Civil Service Commission. Civil Service Okay, Civil Service Commission. Tasked by the Constitution to administer the civil service. The civil service embraces all branches, subdivisions, instrumentalities, and agencies of the government, including government-owned or controlled corporations with original charters. Primary function ng Civil Service Commission: appointments in the civil service shall be made only according to merit and fitness to be determined as far as practicable and except to positions which are policy determining, primarily confidential or highly technical by competitive examination. The civil service shall be composed of a chairman and 2 commissioners. Chairman and 2 commissioners, who shall be natural-born citizens of the Philippines and at the time of appointment at least 35 years of age, with proven capacity for public administration, and must not have been candidates for any elective position in the elections immediately preceding their appointment. The chairman and the commissioners shall be appointed by the President with the consent of the Commission on Appointments for a term of 7 years without reappointment. Of those first appointed, the chairman shall hold office for 7 years, yung chairman. A commissioner for 5 years and another commissioner for 3 years without reappointment. Kasi nga, 3 sila, di ba? The chairman, 7 years ang term. Yung isa sa 2 commissioner, 5 years, at yung isa sa 2 commissioner, 3 years ang kanyang term without reappointment. Appointment to any vacancy shall be only for the unexpired term of the predecessor. In no case shall any member be appointed or designated in a temporary or acting capacity. So, primary jurisdiction ng Civil Service Commission. The Civil Service Commission, as the central personnel agency of the government, shall establish a career service and adopt measures to promote moral, efficiency, integrity, responsiveness, progressiveness, and courtesy in the civil service. It shall strengthen the merit and reward system, integrate all human resource development programs for all level and ranks, and institutionalize a management climate conducive to public accountability. It shall submit to the President and the Congress an annual report of its personnel programs. Okay, ito namang the Commission on Elections, the COMELEC, ikalawa doon sa constitutional commissions, no? There shall be a commission on elections composed of a chairman and 6 commissioners. They shall be, ito sila, chairman and 6 commissioners who shall be natural-born citizens of the Philippines and at the time of appointment at least 35 years of age, holders of a college degree and must not have been candidates for any elective positions. The chairman and majority of the 6 commissioners thereof shall be members of the Philippine Bar who have been engaged in the practice of law for at least 10 years. The chairman and the commissioners shall be appointed by the president with the consent of the Commission on Appointments for a term of 7 years without reappointment. Of those first appointed, 3 members shall hold office for 7 years. So, dahil ito sila the chairman and the 6 commissioners. So, malamang si chairman at yung dalawa sa kanila. So, 3 members shall hold office for 7 years, 2 members for 5 years, and the last members for 3 years. Lahat ito without reappointment. Yung appointment sa kanilang vacancy, kapareho ng Civil Service Commission, sabi, appointment to any vacancy shall be only for the unexpired term of the predecessor. In no case shall any member be appointed or designated in a temporary or acting capacity. Powers. Ano ang powers ng Commission on Elections? COMELEC. Number 1, enforce and administer all laws and regulations relative to the conduct of an election, plebiscite, initiative, referendum, and recall. Number 2, exercise exclusive original jurisdiction over all contests relating to the elections, returns and qualifications of all elective regional, provincial, city officials. Yan. Ulitin natin, meron silang exclusive original jurisdiction over all contests relating to the elections, returns and qualifications of all elective regional, provincial, and city officials. And meron naman silang appellate jurisdiction over all contests involving elective municipal officials decided by trial courts of general jurisdiction or involving barangay officials decided by trial courts of limited jurisdiction. So in the exercise of their appellate jurisdiction, pag nagdesisyon na sila, final na yon at non-appealable. Number 3, decide, except those involving right to vote, all questions affecting elections including determination of the number and location of polling places, appointment of election officials and inspectors, and registration of voters. Number 4, deputize law enforcement for safety with concurrence of the President. Number 5, register after sufficient publication, political parties, organizations, conditions, accredit citizen arms of the COMELEC except religious denominations. Number 6, file upon verified complaint or initiative petitions in court for inclusion or exclusion of voters, prosecute, investigate violations of election laws. Number 7, recommend to Congress measures to limit election spending. Number 8, recommend to the President the removal of any officer or employee for violation, disregard, disobedience to its order. Number 9, submit to the President and Congress a comprehensive report on the conduct of election, plebiscite, initiative, referendum, and recall. At ang ikatatlong Constitutional Commission, yung the Commission on Audit. There shall be a Commission on Audit composed of a chairman and 2 commissioners. Chairman and 2 commissioners, pareho sila ng civil service. Chairman and 2 commissioners who shall be natural-born citizens of the Philippines and at the time of their appointment at least 35 years of age. Certified public accountants with not less than 10 years of auditing experience or members of the Philippine Bar who have been engaged in the practice of law for at least 10 years and must not have been candidates for any elective position in the elections immediately preceding their appointment. At no time shall all members of the Commission belong to the same profession. Chairman and the commissioners shall be appointed by the President with the consent of the Commission on Appointments. Katulad din to sa Civil Service and sa COMELEC, no? For a term of 7 years without reappointment. So of those first appointed, si chairman shall have a term of 7 years, 1 commissioner shall have a term for 5 years, and the other for 3 years. Lahat ito without reappointment. So ano ba ang powers? Yan. The Commission on Audit shall have the power, authority, and duty to examine, audit, and settle all accounts pertaining to the revenue and receipts of and expenditures or uses of funds and property owned or held in trust by or pertaining to the government or any of its subdivisions, agencies, or instrumentalities, including government-owned and controlled corporations, its subsidiaries, yan, with original charters and on post-audit basis. So, i-audit nila yung mga constitutional bodies, letter A, letter B, autonomous state colleges, letter C, GOCCs, and letter D, NGOs receiving subsidy or equity directly or indirectly from or through the government. Kaya naalala ko yung sinasabi ni Pangulong Duterte na mayroong anomalya, pwede niyang ipa-audit ang Red Cross sapagkat nakakatanggap ang Red Cross ng subsidy sa government. The Commission shall have exclusive authority subject to the limitations in this article to define the scope of its audit and examination, establish the techniques and methods required therefore, and promulgate accounting and auditing rules and regulations including those for the prevention and disallowance of irregular, unnecessary, excessive, extravagant, or unconscionable expenditures or uses of government funds and properties. No law shall be passed exempting any entity of the government or its subsidiaries in any guise or any investment of public funds from the jurisdiction of the Commission on Audit. Letter E. So natapos na tayo sa tatlong Constitutional Commission. Talakayin lang natin sandali yung judicial review of final orders, resolutions, and decisions of constitutional commissions. So under